Hi dphog. So today I'd like to chat to you about adverse weather conditions. I all too often hear inexperienced photographers taking a look up at the sky and seeing a few clouds and saying, oh, not very nice weather for photography. Often that's the best weather for photography. This tutorial it's very broad ranging with respect to all types of weather conditions, unpredictable weather conditions. But it's basically just to show you a few images that have either looked like they've been taken in the sun, but actually they've been taken in the rain, or anything around there. So let me just tell you quickly what happened with today's shoot. We initially had planned a theme of Tarzan, and we had this great model who he really looked like he's just walked out of the jungle. We had three exotic beauties that Tarzan was supposed to be voyeuristically observing in their little colonial hideaway in the jungle. So that was the initial plan. The day before, there was a lot of rain, and the weather reports predicted pretty much 80% chance of rain. Some of the other weather reports, as we all know, said just partly cloudy. So we really had no idea what to expect, but decided that the shoot had to go on and we would adapt as we got there. So anyway, as it happens, when we woke up in the morning, it was a beautiful morning. Well, within 2 hours, it had turned to completely overcast skies and raining. I had to make calls, and basically what we decided to do on the day was that we couldn't continue with exactly the same editorial, and we had to change the editorial. So we had to phone two of the models and cancel two of the models and change the story. We had to be able to adapt our story so that we were lighter on our feet, basically easier to operate, quicker to operate, instead of having a very busy set. Now that's one of the ways I use to control weather a little bit more, is try to limit the variables in what you're doing. That's all just from a production point of view. Let's get onto set with the cameras now. One of the easiest things that you can do when you're working in adverse weather conditions, cloudy weather conditions, for instance, that a lot of people think it's not great weather to shoot in. I love shooting in cloudy conditions, and a lot of the time what I'll do is I'll just bump my Kelvin setting up, or alternatively, if you are shooting raw as I do, I bump it up in post, but if you're a JPEG shooter, just bump it up a little bit on your camera. So a cloudy day, warmed up to feel warm, starts at about 6,500 Kelvin, and you can go anywhere from there. Alternately, play along with the weather and make it a cold day. Cold and adverse weather conditions are very emotional weather conditions. If you want to create intensity, bring the weather into play. Now, that you'll learn in a lot of film books. I don't think it's ever taught anywhere in photography that bring the rain in. You either fake the rain, or if you've got a rainy day, you work with that rainy day to intensify the emotions of the day. I can't give you direct and specific guidelines because I'm not talking about a specific shoot. I'm just talking about how to adapt to weather conditions. So now that we had a lighter setup, we refined the styling, changed the story somewhat. Obviously, we were still with the same wardrobe, two of the same characters, but we just had to change the storyline ever so slightly. And I think in this image that's up on screen now of the two ladies sitting on the couch, it's a wonderful final image, and it really doesn't look like it was taken in the rain. They were literally, well, as far from the rain as was necessary to keep them dry. So it was probably that distance out of the rain. And if you look at some of these detail areas over here of the images, you can see there's raindrops falling in the background. You can see there's splash coming up on the sides from the drops that are falling. But in the final image, it's really negligible. And if there are one or two very obvious drops falling, a little bit of Photoshop will get rid of that very, very quickly. I think the beauty of the lesson is, though, that you simply cannot tell that it's rainy weather. So the first thing that I did do on the shoot was, when the weather conditions are very unpredictable, you either need to push up the levels on your flash to overpower what's happening naturally. That's the one thing that you can do, but what happens with that is that it adversely affects your exposure in the natural areas of your image. So I'm not a big fan of that, but that is one of your go-tos that you simply overpower with the lights that you're working with. If in my situation I didn't want to do that, what I had to do then was protect myself from the weather conditions. Now the reason for that is on this particular morning, by midday, we'd had thunder, we had lightning, we had rain, overcast conditions, we had sun, and we had blue skies, and we had thunder, lightning, and rain again. So given those conditions, within an editorial thread, you can't have some of your pictures looking like bright sunlight and some of your pictures looking like gloomy overcast day. So what I do is I basically try to withdraw a little bit or protect everybody as much as possible from the weather conditions. So you'll see we're shooting behind curtains. That's just to make sure that everything has a very soft light feel, and we make sure that we never get directly into sunlight conditions or too close to the edge. Even though it is overcast, if you're under a roof, then make sure that you're a meter or two in from the side, because it is still relatively harsh, the natural light that is coming in, and you will detect that. So I either hid behind the curtains or I moved further in under the protection of the roofed off area. Okay, so the other thing that we also had for the shoot were two gazebos on the sides, and I just tried to make sure, again, under the gazebo, under a protected light space where we wouldn't detect too much of a shift in the weather. These results really speak for themselves. It's relatively simple. Protect yourself as much as you can. Don't try to chase a little bit of sun or, oh, now it's rain. Rather make peace with the fact that in an unpredictable day, you withdraw a little bit from the weather. Don't move inside, don't eliminate it completely, but withdraw just far enough so that you can control it more. The more you withdraw from the edges of the weather, the easier it is for you to control the weather conditions with a little bit of full flash from the inside. Okay, so when you're on your next location shoot and the weather really isn't playing along, you are really fortunate if it's a severely overcast day, because that's probably the biggest scrim with the most beautiful, soft, natural light that you're ever going to find. And the only other advice is, if it is raining, hopefully you've got a little bit of cover nearby, and don't let that deter you. Remember, just bump those kelvins and it's gonna look like a warm, calm afternoon. So if you check out this link to a previous video that we made about an alternative way of seeing golden hour, have a watch and you'll see that some of my favorite light is a half an hour after sunset. So that's kind of sorta what I'm talking about. Severely overcast conditions, undercover. It's a similar light. It's soft, it's beautiful, it's just the right amount of natural light. You'll be bumping your ISOs, you'll be shooting at 400 or 800 or 1000, but don't let that worry you. The light is spectacular. So here's a great example that I shot quite a while back, and this photograph was taken basically on the most southern rocks on the continent of Africa, at a place called Cape Agulhas, known to the locals as the Cape of Storms. I think we had a little bit of sun on some of the days, but most of the time it was completely overcast, but the conditions are superb. I mean, the results speak for themselves. The lighting is absolutely sublime. Some of the most beautiful light I've seen over the world. If you ever get the opportunity, go there. Cape Agulhas. It's the southernmost tip, the last few rocks on that big old continent called Africa. So here's an example of a really windy day. We had quite an expensive production. Large team of people traveling very long distances and having to stay over for multiple evenings in a place called Verneekpan. Now, what that basically translates to in English is that it's a place where the horizon messes with your mind. It's so flat and so vast, and you cannot see the edge of it, that when you look to the horizon, tiny little bushes that are 20 centimeters high, it does look like you're going into an oasis. I mean, you've seen that many times in movies where someone's coming over a hill and they're having this mirage of an oasis or something, and it's very real in places like this. Hence the name verneekpan, which basically means fooling you on the pans. So on verneekpan, on the day that our production was supposed to begin, the wind came up and we simply couldn't work because our model's hair was just all over the place. And the poor hairstylist was jumping up and down, not knowing what to do. We just simply couldn't work. So half a day went by and we were getting really frustrated by the weather conditions. And eventually I could sense the mood on set was one of frustration and people were starting to get edgy. And what I did in this instance, I decided that in these weather conditions, I'd still maybe be able to get a few stills. And I think that's the fastest cover shoot I ever did. These images that you're seeing up on the screen now for this cover shoot, I think the entire shoot lasted about 10 minutes. And I think we got some wonderful results out of that. So again, just an indication of how to observe the weather conditions and realize where to move your pieces around the chessboard essentially to get something out of the adverse weather conditions still. dphog, I hope you enjoyed this one, and if you did, please spread the word. See you next time.